Whatever you say nothing when you talk about you know what. For if you know should hear you, you know what you'll get. They'll take you off to you know where, and you wouldn't know how long. So for you know whose sake, don't let anyone hear you singing this song. This first-person film, set in the 1950s, reminds us how Catholic grammar schools insisted on blind obedience. The system was a bully, thriving on parents and children being shamed into silence. The author's answer was resistance, mocking his tormentors as the twisted paper tigers they were. Starting as early as 5 years old, he fought against their unfairness and found standing up for yourself was its own reward. But those powers insisted on whatever you say nothing. Oh, Mrs. McGraw, the sergeant said, would you like to make the soldier out of your son, Ted? With a scarlet coat and a big cocked hat. Oh, Mrs. McGraw, wouldn't you like that? Would you too-ray-ah, too-ray-ah, would you too-ray-ah? That's Pete Seeger's favorite Irish anti-war song. It's a recruiting sergeant conning Mrs. McGraw into giving him her son. And after this piece, we'll see how that works out for both of them. Mustache Madness. Medical training, Fort Sam Houston, San Antonio, Texas, December 1966. I had been in this boy's army about 3 months when, after I came back from Christmas leave, I was waiting in platoon formation, wearing my brand new mustache, when I heard, Sullivan, fall out! Oh, shite. What do they want now? Meanwhile, it's 30 degrees out, and it's 5 o'clock in the morning. And only my platoon will be kept from going to the mess hall for breakfast. This is a recipe for a blanket party. You see, one guy screws up, they punish his unit. His unit takes it out on him. The Army lets your peers do what is illegal for them to do. Hit an enlisted man. Great fascist tradition for enforcing norms and weeding out misfits like me. This is usually done in the cowardly style the KKK would love, under cover of darkness and under the cover of an army blanket. They sneak up on their sleeping intended victim, throw the blanket over him, and pummel away. And the possibility of naming your assailants is nil. So what can the authorities do? We shall revisit that sadistic soldier turning on soldier after we watch my alleged superiors trot out their dog and pony show about a mustache. Sergeant Coulter, my platoon sergeant, didn't have the foggiest idea what to make of me. We were both Irish-American, working class from Brooklyn, but a generation is not all that separated us. He was thinking, this kid's got 2 weeks leave, he goes home to New York, and he comes back here with this silly mustache on his face. Looking back on this, there was a lot of time and energy spent on facial hair, on both sides of the issue. everybody was making a big deal about hair. It was a 60s issue. My brother, Richie, my oldest brother, who was an artillery officer, told me, they can tell you to trim the mustache. They can't tell you to shave it. They have regulations for maintaining it, so they all look alike. They instructed you to shave your upper lip clean for your original ID card in boot camp. So that is the face you must look like. That's their catch-22. I have a catch-22 of my own. I realized when they were taking the photos for our ID cards, they were Polaroids. That means I had the original and the only copy. Now, what if that original is on my dresser at home in New York, right where I want it? They supply the rules and the catch-22s, not me. Back to Sergeant Coulter and I. The sergeant brings me back to the barracks, up the stairs, to my locker, and orders me to open it up. I say to myself, holy shit, somebody's ratted on me about the grass in my locker. As I opened the lock, the sergeant pointed to the top shelf and said, "Get your toilet bag." I knew there was no grass in that bag. So I said, "Why, Sergeant?" You are never supposed to say why to a sergeant. They just go nuts. It's like nobody ever said that word to them. You're just supposed to do it. Well, I smiled a smile of deep relief, knowing that the sergeant was not looking for my weed. I must have had an odd look on my face, staring back at him, because he said, "Don't you eyeball me, boy. Get your kit bag and get your ass into the latrine and shave that thing." The sergeant was so close. He was so close to my grass, but he wasn't looking for it. I had a shit-eating grin on. I just couldn't stifle it. "Wipe that silly smile off your face, Sullivan, or I'll wipe it off for you. I gave you an order to get that bag out." I kept smiling and shut the locker door. Sergeant, sorry, Sarge, I'm keeping this," I said, pointing to my mustache. "The colonel's going to have your ass on a platter, young man." "Sergeant, just between you and me, my old man was a New York City cop, so I've been beaten up by professionals. This is like old home week to me. Besides, you guys can't lay a hand on me, or you'll lose your stripes, right?" "Wise up, punk. You're just making it hard on yourself. You don't think the Army has 100 different ways to make your life miserable? Don't push your luck, Sullivan." "Yes, Sergeant." "Get down the stairs and down to the orderly room." "Yes, Sergeant." Seems like folks were always telling me not to push my luck. I'd be pushing it all day long if that's all it took. But I had no idea what chicken shit lay ahead. Downstairs I went, down along the path of white-painted rocks. If it stands still long enough in the Army, you paint it. I was ordered to see the first sergeant, so I was standing in the orderly room, orderly, like you're supposed to, when all the NCOs come filing into the office. All the privates have been left with their instructors, who are trying to make medics out of them. Corporal Gomez was the last to walk in, being the most junior of all the NCOs. He was a short, muscular man in his mid-20s, with a bantam rooster walk and a sparse, adolescent mustache he was very proud of. A friend of mine used to call this kind of mustache a baseball mustache, because, like baseball, there was 9 on a side, 9 hairs on each side of your nose. Gomez thought he would flex his harassment muscles in front of the big guy, so he says to me, "What'd you get that caterpillar on your lip, Private?" You better cut that off before the colonel cuts off something else for you. Before anyone gets the chuckle, I commented on Gomez's meager mustache. Well, Corporal, when you grow up, you can have a mustache like this too. The orderly room busy noise dropped dead. Sergeant Coulter spit his coffee about halfway across the room. Everybody was stunned that a private smartass first class would sass any NCO. It was unthinkable. It was that gasp silence I had heard before when I dared to hit back that sadistic 10th grade English teacher back in Archbishop Malloy High School, who had already hit me about 6 times in the face, bloodying my nose. That whole class gasped like it had one enormous mouth. Leave us not digress. All Gomez could muster was a lame reply, the phrasing flustered by his bluster, but he was pissed. Some nobody private was dissing his stash. Oh, Private, after the colonel gets through chewing you out, I'm going to chew you a new asshole. You get your ass back here at 1700 hours, and we'll go down to the river, and we'll make a real man out of you. I wasn't sure who this guy was, but I did let my lip shoot off before my brain kicked in. But what could he do? Make me fold back the sheets in the riverbed? Don't say that. Don't say that out loud. You're in enough trouble. And you haven't even seen the first sergeant yet. Private! Well, no doubt who they're talking to here. I was the only private in the room. First sergeant's office, on the double. The door was about 12 feet away, so double or single time wouldn't have mattered to anyone without a stopwatch. As I crossed the threshold of the office door, there's a real musty smell in the wood. It's familiar. That's my grandpa's cheap cigar smoke. Garcia Vega. When I'm snapped back to reality. Private! Where's your ID card? Gee, Sergeant, I don't know. Wipe that shit-eating grin off your face, young man. While you're at it, wipe that silly mustache off your face, too. Sorry, Sergeant. No can do. What? Are you disobeying a direct order from a non-commissioned officer of this United States Army? I guess so, Sergeant. You're going to go to jail for a silly mustache? I don't think so, Sergeant. Well, I tell you what, Private. You want to fry your own ass? I don't care. Don't do it on my time. Get over to the captain's office. Waste his time. Get out of my sight. Well, now that was interesting. If I was really in trouble, why wasn't I in the stockade? And the sergeant sounded pretty serious. I didn't even consider it might be an idle threat. Why not? Are they playing with me? What the hell is going on? I'm thinking out loud to myself as I crossed the compound to the captain's office. Down another pathway of tacky white painted stones. They were all about bowling ball size, containing the would-be unruly patches of grass, like horticultural crowd control. The captain's office is a separate, one-story, 2-tiny-room cottage. And as I knock and enter, the front door barely misses the second lieutenant's desk. A thin brass sign on his desk says, Peyton Gray, second lieutenant. He's got one of those WASP names where you can swap the first and the last name. And he's from Connecticut with one of those really preppy voices. You can't tell if he's rich or he went to school with them. Yes, Private. The first sergeant told me to come over and see the captain. You don't have an appointment? And the captain is very busy. I don't know. The first sergeant... Hold on just a moment, young man. There's that young man shit again. This guy's no more than 6 months older than me, and he's calling me young man. A guy like this grabs any opportunity for posing, like he has real power over those below him. The lieutenant picks up the big, black, clunky Army-issue phone that makes him look like he's working out with a barbell. Kids, this is back when all phones were rotary. It was hard work dialing those phones. Sergeant, what am I supposed to do with this private you sent over to see the captain? He's not in the area. Sergeant. The sergeant has obviously hung up on him. Cretin. Well, Private, just have a seat. The first sergeant says to just wait until the captain returns to the company area. Oh, could I have breakfast? It's 9:30 and I haven't had anything to eat since last night. I mean, I thought you guys had regulations about this kind of stuff. I knew very well they had regulations. You should have asked about that before. Well, never mind. Go to the mess hall immediately and whatever you get, bring it back here with a hot tea with lemon for me. Mach schnell. Yes, sir, Lieutenant. I walked out casually as possible down to the mess. I now had an okay from an officer to be sauntering into the mess where only the NCOs would be, as all their platoons would be in class at this time. I walked in, past the table where all the sergeant corporals are seated, tipped a hat respectfully, and head for the chow line, where the breakfast is still steaming. So far, so good. Take all you want, but eat what you take, was the Army slogan above the stainless tray slide. It reminded me of home. Well, at least the eat all you take part. I lopped a pile of scrambled eggs and a plop of potatoes on my plate, slid the plastic tray with the special ugly beige plastic cup, got my coffee, and sat down to chow down. I had about a forkful of strangled eggs in my gob when the mess sergeant yelled from the back of the mess hall, "Private, who told you to come in here and eat in my dining hall? You see any other privates in here? Answer me, fool." I started shoveling eggs and potatoes and answering in a kind of muffled mumble to buy a little more time, because it was a long dining hall, and the corpulent sergeant didn't look like he was up for a run or even a quick walk. "Lieutenant Mays, Donna, you better get your E1 ass out of my dining room, boy." "The lieutenant said I should, Sergeant," I said, clearing my mouth momentarily. This gave me time for another assault on the stuff left on my plate, and there, I had it polished off by the time the sergeant got within striking range. I still had a half a cup of coffee left, and as I stood up, the sergeant was really close, 5 or 6 feet away, and he carried a 5-gallon pot and a serving spoon the entire distance, and he was now using the spoon for emphasis. The lieutenant asked me to get him a tea, too, Sarge." "Don't you understand English? You ain't supposed to be here." "Sarge, I'm going, but I'm just doing what the lieutenant said because I didn't get any breakfast this morning." "Oh, yeah? Well, you got it now. And tell that second lieutenant to get his own fucking tea." Fucking lieutenants. I heard the sergeants laughing, but he didn't care. They were the audience this mess hall sergeant was playing to. This was their little clubhouse, and he was the sergeant at arms with a serving spoon and a steel pot. I walked back into the tiny cottage, and of course, the first thing the lieutenant says is, "Private Sullivan, where is my hot tea with lemon?" "Oh, well, the mess sergeant really objected to my presence there, sir, and you might say he rejected your request for a tea with some salty talk. At the same time, he threw me out of the mess hall." Moron, he can't even cook eggs properly. The lieutenant ignored me and picked up his clunky black Army-issue phone. "Sergeant, this is Lieutenant Gray. I'm in charge of the refreshments for the select citizens and officers picnic out at Lake Wassa. And I understand your very unofficial part-time catering business is interested in providing a catering service for our very private soiree, I suggest you show me a sample of how well your catering service works by sending a tea service of your finest Army-issue tea with a plate of lemon slices and a sugar bowl. I believe we understand each other? Thank you, Sergeant. Blatherskite. Up to that point, I wasn't too keen on this guy, but without raising his voice, he let the sergeant know that rank was really irrelevant. He could hurt him in his pocketbook. It was like that very traditional cross-stitch framed sampler Chuck Colson had on his White House office wall. When you have them by the balls, their hearts and minds are sure to follow. What a noble sentiment. I was still waiting an hour and a half later when the captain waltzed in the door, flew through the room, and slammed his office door. Captain, the lieutenant tentatively knocked on the thin paneled wood door. The first sergeant sent this private over to see you a few hours ago. The door swung open suddenly. The lieutenant jerked back, flinching his arms together. He's right here. I saw him, Lieutenant. I practically kicked him on the way in. What's your problem, son? This must be some petty trick they teach these insecure young officers. This guy's like 5 years older than me, and he's calling me son. Well, sir, people are making a lot of fuss over this mustache. It feels all right to me. Where's your ID card? Don't know, sir. Oh, I see. You lost your ID card. Very convenient. Shave that thing. Get a new ID card made at the Provost Marshal. Sorry, sir, I'd like to keep this mustache. You see that? Did you hear me, Private? I gave you an order. Well, was that a lawful order, sir? Because I believe, I don't give a rat's ass what you believe, Private. Go see the Sergeant Major at headquarters. We'll see what you believe. He'll make a believer out of you. Out. I walked out the door on the way to headquarters, down another long row of painted white rocks, up another row, out onto the gravel road to headquarters. You could see the flags from a half a mile away. This is where the training center was run from. All 2,700 trainees, and I was the only one asking to have a mustache on my face. I walked up the path of painted rocks between the rows of snapping flags into the orderly room. Behind an enormous desk stood a very decorated African-American sergeant major in a file cabinet. His dress greens had even darker insignia, signifying he had been to Nam. He had 3 chevrons on top, 3 rockers on the bottom, and a star in the middle, meaning he had the highest rank of any NCO in this man's army. And he looked serious. Yes, Private. What do you want? The phone rang next to his hand. Sergeant Major Towns? Yes, I think so. Thank you, sir. Goodbye. Private Sullivan, sit down. Sounds like you've been causing trouble in your company area. Insubordination. Disobeying direct orders. Well, don't you interrupt me, boy. Did I say you could speak? I am a sergeant major, is that clear? Yes, sir. Don't you sir me either. I'm a sergeant, period. Any thought of keeping that mustache on your face will cease when you cross the threshold of the colonel's door. Because, Private, if you disobey a direct order from a field-grade officer in the time of war, you may get up to 5 years in Leavenworth. Is that clear, young man? I haven't seen the papers today, Sergeant, but I don't think we declared war last night. Come to think of it, Private, that criteria may be during a police action as well. Frankly, I don't care. It's your ass that's on the line, son. Feeling lucky? Well, it's time for you to find out. Just walk over to that door and knock. The Colonel is ready and waiting for you. He's got the barbecue warmed up for your butt. I tentatively knocked on the full-bird Colonel's door, and somebody barked from within. Open! It's open! I walked to the Colonel's desk, turned right crisply, and saluted. The Colonel is dressed in battle fatigues. This does not look good. Battle fatigues are usually worn by infantry officers stateside, not medical officers, and fatigues usually imply the wearer is a hard ass. His fatigues are so starch, you could use his shirt sleeve to cut cold butter. Lost your ID card, Sullivan? I think so, sir. I think so on purpose would be closer to the truth, wouldn't it, Private? Well, I don't, don't shit me, son. I got no time for stories here. What's your game? My game, sir? Well, I just want to wear my mustache as a matter of personal pride. And the Army tricked me into shaving it off before my ID card picture was taken. How's that they tricked you? Well, they said anyone who wanted to could grow back their mustache in AIT. Medical training was AIT, Advanced Individual Training. Well, I can't see you've broken any rules, but you must read the regulations on trimming. When you've trimmed it, report to Sergeant Major Towns for an approval to put your new face on an ID card at the Provo. Now, I do not want to see that face in this office again. Are we clear? Yes, sir. Dismissed. Oh, I forgot. One detail. The Colonel had a mustache. One of those Ronald Colman mustaches that military men of his era sported. Its hairs were all 1/4 of an inch long and covered about 3/8 of an inch of his upper lip, top to bottom, and its arc was a study in symmetry. I couldn't believe my ears, though. They just fuck with my head for an entire day, as it was 5 o'clock when I walked out of the Colonel's office. I had guessed right. I had the right to wear the mustache, and they're the ones who said I could grow it back in AIT. They just wasted my time and tested how much I wanted it. But I lucked out because I was just that stubborn. Like my mom used to say, there's no sense being Irish if you're not going to be stubborn. Stubborn was not a problem. I had the stubborn gene way down in my DNA. And I didn't give a rat's ass about getting in trouble, because that would get me closer to getting thrown out for being too much trouble. But this was going to take a while because of that hurry up and wait. I did succeed in sticking out from the crowd, which really pisses off military folks who want everybody to look the same. And their fixation for controlling facial hair should be studied by a panel of bearded psychiatrists. This mustache did get the attention of some neo-Nazis in my barracks. And we should segue to the blanket party after this verse from the song we started with. Mrs. McGraw, her son has come back from the war, and he's missing his legs. And his mom says to him, "Oh, were you drunk or were you blind when you left your 2 fine legs behind? Oh, was it while sailing on the sea that a cannonball took your legs away with your 2 fine legs?" And the son replies, "Oh, dearest ma'am, don't carry on so, 'cause I got 50 pounds for every toe. And if I had another 10 toes, I'd be off to the war and trading those. With your two-raya, two-raya, with your two fine legs. Whatever you say nothing when you talk about you know what. For if you know should hear you, you know what you'll get. They'll take you off to you know where, and you wouldn't know how long. So for you know whose sake, don't let anyone hear you singing this song.